Hello, my name is Olivia, and I am 35 years old. My life is measured out in even, predictable segments from one quarterly report to the next, and I find a strange comfort in this regularity. I am a financial analyst at a reputable investment firm in San Diego. My job is well paid, and I perform it flawlessly because numbers are the only reality that never fails. Their cold, indisputable logic contains a meaning that people, including myself, have always lacked. And before we continue, write in the comments from which city you are watching this video. Enjoy. 3 years ago, I divorced Brian. That decision, heavy as a granite boulder, seemed like the only right one at the time, a desperate gesture for future freedom. After the legal dust settled and the court proceedings ended, I received a substantial settlement. And instead of, as common sense and my professional instinct would suggest, investing that money in soulless stocks or bonds, I did something I had only ever vaguely dreamed of. I bought a beach house. It cost $1.5 million, an astronomical sum, but every penny spent was worth that feeling of connection to eternity I experienced the first time I crossed its threshold. My house, my real home, is located right on the edge of the ocean. In the mornings, I wake up not to an alarm clock, but to the dull roar of waves crashing on the shore, coming right through my bedroom windows. On clear evenings, which are not rare here, I watch the sun, glowing red hot, slowly sink into the leaden water, sitting on my spacious deck. It is my refuge, my safe place, the only patch of land in this universe that belongs solely to me. I do have a family, of course. My mother's name is Deborah. My father's is Thomas. They live 40 minutes away from here, in a respectable, well-kept neighborhood where all the houses look alike, like identical twins. I also have a younger sister, Madison. She is 28, and those 7 years between us have never been just a number, but a whole chasm. Our relationship has always been normal. Not exactly hostile, but not close either. Nothing terrible, nothing remarkable. One Tuesday, right in the middle of the day, I had to leave work earlier than usual. I had forgotten a folder with important documents at home, needed for a meeting with a key client the next morning. I don't usually return home midday, and this unscheduled visit caused me mild irritation, like a glitch in a well-oiled program. As I was driving up to the house, I noticed my mother's familiar sedan parked by the curb through the windshield. She had a spare key to my place just in case. I wondered for a second what it could mean. Probably she had dropped by to leave something or, conversely, to pick up something forgotten during her last visit. I turned off the engine, approached the front door, and had already reached out with my key when I heard muffled voices through the wood. Someone was talking in the living room. The weather was beautiful, and the windows were wide open, making the words reach me with frightening crystal clarity. I froze on the threshold, leaving the key sticking in the keyhole. "This house is perfect for the wedding," said my mother's voice, Deborah's. Her tone held not just approval, but almost triumph. "Absolutely perfect. The ocean view, the deck, the size of the living room. It's exactly what we need." "Are you sure Olivia will be okay with this?" asked Madison, and her voice carried familiar notes of uncertainty that always preceded her giving in to our mother's pressure. "Of course she will," Deborah cut off, and there wasn't a shadow of doubt in her words. "It's family property. Olivia owes us for everything we've done for her. Besides, she occupies all this space alone and never really uses it. It's just wasteful." "I suppose you're right," Madison picked up, more animatedly now. "We can have the ceremony on the deck and the reception in the living room and on the lawn. We'll need to rent chairs and tables. I think there will be about 200 guests. 200 guests. In my house. At my sister's wedding, which I was learning about like this, by chance, standing on my own doorstep. As if I didn't exist here. What about decorations?" Madison's question came again. "White flowers everywhere," my mother began describing enthusiastically. "Roses, lilies, orchids. We'll place lanterns along the deck railing. I saw such a beautiful arrangement in a magazine. It would be perfect." Their voices, full of plans and rosy hopes, continued to sound, merging into a single resonant stream. They enthusiastically discussed menu options, the optimal bar location, the exact time for the ceremony. Neither of them, not with a single word or hint, mentioned asking for my permission. They simply assumed that my house, my ark, my salvation was something like public property, a family resort they had the right to manage as they saw fit, whenever they pleased. I stood at my front door, unable to tear myself away from this chilling spectacle, and listened as they planned an entire wedding in my own house, behind my back, without deeming me worthy of a thought about my consent. My fingers involuntarily clenched into helpless fists, and I felt my hands trembling treacherously. A hot wave of indignation rose to my throat, giving birth to a fierce desire to fling the door open, burst into the living room, and demand an answer, to ask what the hell they were doing here. But my legs seemed rooted to the spot. Something held me there, perhaps the soul-paralyzing shock, or maybe the damned aching curiosity, the desire to see just how far these two would go in their brazen planning. As if in a dream, I quietly, on tiptoe, stepped back from the door, returned to the car, and drove away, leaving my house to the mercy of their as-yet unfulfilled dreams. I ended up in a noisy downtown coffee shop, staring into the opaque depths of a cooling latte I never dared to bring to my lips. For 2 hours, I sat in a strange stupor, staring into space, until finally an automatic movement brought me back to the beach house. The cars were gone, as if they had never been there. I didn't call. I didn't text. I just waited, bracing myself with anticipation, watching this play unfold, in which I seemed to have been cast as a silent extra. Exactly 1 week later, my mother called. Her voice, sweet and taut as a string, invited me to dinner at a posh restaurant on the occasion of a special family event. When I entered the dining room, Madison was already there with a young man I didn't know. "Olivia, this is Jacob Miller," my sister said, and her smile lit up the space around her. "My fiancé." He was pleasant-looking, dressed in an impeccable suit, about 30 years old. The dinner proceeded normally. We ordered from the exquisite menu, exchanged light, casual phrases. Jacob seemed nice and well-mannered. He talked animatedly about his work in tech, politely asked about mine, laughed at my father's jokes. Madison didn't let go of his hand, and her gaze, full of adoration, was fixed on his face. Under the pretext of freshening up, I excused myself and headed for the ladies' room. On my way back, I froze at the entrance to the main dining area. There, in a niche, stood my mother with her back to me, holding her phone to her ear. "Yes, Veronica, everything is working out perfectly." Her voice rang with triumph. "Madison's wedding will finally restore our family's reputation after that shameful divorce of Olivia's. Finally, we'll have something to be proud of again." I stood frozen behind a massive pot with a decorative palm tree, listening to how easily and habitually she ground my life into dust for her friend. The perfect location, right on the beach, very elegant, looks very expensive. People will be impressed. I waited until she finished the conversation and returned to the table with a stony face, pretending nothing had happened. Another week passed and my mother called again, this time inviting me to dinner at my parents' house. She mentioned that a few of her friends from the club would be there, whom she wanted me to meet. When I crossed the threshold, 3 women I didn't know were sitting in the living room on the ottoman. They were the picture of prosperity, well-groomed in expensive outfits with jewelry that probably cost more than my car. During dinner, in a pause between courses, my mother stood up and, smiling, lightly tapped her spoon against the edge of her crystal glass. "I have a wonderful announcement," she proclaimed, looking around at those gathered. "Olivia has generously agreed to provide her beautiful beach house for Madison's wedding. Isn't that wonderful?" The gazes of all 3 women fixed on me, their faces spread into approving, sweet smiles, their heads nodding. I had fallen into a skillfully set trap. Any no thrown in the face of these witnesses she had invited would instantly turn me into a monster, a horrible, selfish sister, denying her own family help. My mother knew what she was doing by staging this performance. I sat there, feeling my throat tighten under the gaze of everyone present, waiting for a reaction. Of course, my own, almost alien voice sounded. I even managed to conjure something like a smile on my face. Happy to help? The women clapped their hands. Madison impulsively hugged me, and my mother looked at me with unadulterated, deafening triumph. Over the next few weeks, my house, my once inviolable refuge, turned into a thoroughfare. My mother and Madison appeared with enviable regularity, laden with fabric swatches, scattered floor plans, and printed Pinterest boards with countless wedding ideas. They walked through my rooms with an air as if it were their legitimate property, their voices, full of plans, ringing under the vaults that had previously held only the quiet whisper of the ocean. They unceremoniously moved my furniture, assessing how the space would look, and mentioned in passing that I would have to move out temporarily to make room for their decorations. Not once during all this time did they ask for my opinion. Not a single word of gratitude for my supposedly voluntary consent was uttered. My mother would only say things like, "This will be much better than some generic hotel," and in response, I would just smile silently and nod, a knot of indignation tightening inside me. But I wasn't just silent, I was listening, and I was recording everything. Quietly, with cold determination, I went online and bought several compact voice-activated audio recorders. One of them, small and inconspicuous, I hid behind the massive frame of a painting in the living room. The second found a spot in a kitchen cabinet among the tea supplies. The third found a home in the dining room. And then I waited for their next visit, like a spider at the center of its web. They returned. 2 days later, while I was at work, they let themselves into my house again using my mother's spare key. That evening, settled in the quiet of my study, I downloaded the recordings. My mother's voice was clear and venomous. "Olivia owes us for being born. Children should always obey their mother and not argue. That's how families work." Madison mumbled something in response, indistinct. "Olivia has always been stupid and useless," my mother continued, not hiding her contempt. "At least her house will finally be good for something. This wedding is exactly what this family needs." I played the recording 3 times. With each listen, a freezing emptiness grew inside me, but along with it came something else, a crystal clear, merciless clarity. I finally knew exactly what I had to do. The next day, using a long lunch break, I met with a lawyer. Her name was Jennifer Harris, and she specialized in property law. I found her through a colleague who spoke highly of her professionalism. I outlined the essence of the problem to her. I needed to ensure the complete and absolute protection of my home from any encroachment and develop a clear plan of action. I told her everything about the planned wedding, the manipulations, the secret recordings. Jennifer listened attentively, making concise notes in a notebook. When I finished, she leaned back in her chair. "First, let's check the ownership documents," she said in a businesslike tone. "I'll pull the records from the county registry to be absolutely sure you are the sole owner." Over the next week, Jennifer helped me build a strategy. She obtained the registry extracts that confirmed what I already knew. The house was mine, only mine, and no one else had any legal rights to it. "So," Jennifer said during our second meeting, "you mentioned the wedding is scheduled for a specific weekend, and you want to prevent them from using your property without direct, open confrontation." "Exactly," I confirmed. The corners of her lips touched with a slight, understanding smile. "I have an idea." And then Jennifer introduced me to Pacific Studios, a production company that filmed location scenes for various series in San Diego and was constantly looking for interesting and authentic locations. I met with their location scout, an imposing man with thin-rimmed glasses, and showed him a series of photos of my house. He flipped through them with growing interest, and that very spark I hoped to see ignited in his eyes. "This is perfect for the beach house scenes we're shooting right now," he concluded, nodding approvingly. "When is the property available?" I gave him the dates, those very fateful weekends, now 6 weeks away. They, of course, suited me perfectly. We signed a contract. Pacific Studios rented my house for that entire weekend for $5,000, a sum that seemed not only profitable, but symbolically sweet to me. The contract was notarized and filed with the county, acquiring the force of unshakable law. The company, following bureaucratic protocol, also notified the local police department about the upcoming shoot, legalizing my little counteroffensive. The irony of the situation was delightful. On the very day my sister's wedding was supposed to take place in my house, a film crew would be in charge here with their cables and lighting equipment. 2 weeks before the scheduled date, late at night, my phone rang insistently. It was Madison. "Olivia, can I come over? I need to talk to you about something." Her voice was trembling. She arrived 20 minutes later, still in her pajamas with a coat hastily thrown over them. Her eyes were red and swollen from tears. We settled on my sofa, and she sat for a long time in oppressive silence, clutching the edge of a cushion. "I'm not sure I want to marry Jacob," she finally exhaled, not looking up. "I don't know if I actually love him. Essentially, Mom chose him. She introduced us at one of her club events. She chose my dress. She compiled the guest list. She decided on the decorations, flowers, and menu. I feel like I'm just watching someone else's life." I looked at my sister and saw something I hadn't noticed before behind her curated smile. She looked genuinely scared and lost, like a child in a dark room. "Have you told Mom about your feelings?" I asked carefully. Madison laughed, but it was a bitter, cracked sound. "Are you kidding? She'll kill me. She's already told everyone about this wedding. She posted about it all over social media. She even got an article published in California Lifestyle magazine." "Wait, what article?" I became alert. "You haven't seen it? She gave a whole interview dedicated to family traditions and our family beach house. She told them this house has been in our family for generations." I felt my jaw clench at this brazen lie. The house I bought 3 years ago with my own, solely earned money. "I know. I'm sorry," Madison whispered. "I should have said something, but you know what my mom is like." I knew. That was the very root of the whole problem. "Madison," I asked softly, "what do you really want?" She raised her tear-filled eyes to me. "I want to make my own choices. I want to feel like my life belongs to me." I put my arm around her shoulders, and she started crying for real, with her whole being. We sat like that for a while, not speaking, just being there together. For the first time, it hit me with frightening clarity. My sister and I were victims of the same person. My mother had manipulated us both, just using different levers. But I also knew that in 2 weeks, everything would blow up. The film crew would arrive. The wedding would be canceled. My mother's perfect, meticulously constructed plan would collapse. And I couldn't wait to see her face in that moment. I didn't tell Madison about the rental. Part of me writhed with guilt for this omission. But I also understood that she would definitely tell our mother, intentionally or accidentally. And I desperately needed the element of surprise, that very bolt from the blue. So I just held my sister tighter, made her some tea, and let her cry on my sofa, knowing that her tears were just a quiet harbinger of the coming storm. The day of the wedding arrived. I woke up at dawn when the first rays of the sun were just beginning to gild the crests of the ocean waves, and headed to an elegant restaurant on the opposite side of the boulevard, which offered a flawless panoramic view of my beach house. Taking a table on the spacious veranda, I ordered breakfast and, holding a cup of freshly brewed coffee, prepared to watch the spectacle unfolding below. Right at 6 in the morning, the first Pacific Studios truck pulled up to the house. Busily and without fuss, the film crew began unloading cameras, lighting equipment, and other gear, cordoning off the perimeter of the property with a temporary fence. Official warning signs appeared everywhere. Commercial filming in progress, unauthorized access prohibited. I took a slow sip of the invigorating Arabica and settled in to wait. Around 9 in the morning, the first wedding vendors started arriving at my house. A catering van, a florist's car packed with white flowers, and a truck with neatly stacked tables and chairs. They all halted uncertainly before the improvised barrier. Security guards in bright yellow vests politely but firmly turned them away, showing the rental contract and all the necessary permits. Soon, my mother's familiar car pulled up. She swiftly popped out of the passenger seat and rushed towards the guards, while Madison, dressed in an $8,000 wedding dress, a price I had accidentally learned from a receipt she left at my house, hesitantly followed her. I couldn't hear the words, but I saw my mother gesticulating wildly, pointing at the house, then at Madison in her wedding dress, then at the growing crowd of perplexed guests. The guards remained unyielding. One of them produced the folder with documents again, and then my mother started screaming. Her piercing, hysterical voice was audible even over the street noise. 2 police cars arrived at the scene. The officers, getting out of their vehicles, listened to the security guards, carefully examined the papers presented to them, and then engaged in a dialogue with my mother. One of the officers just shrugged and shook his head, while she, unrestrained, screamed right in his face. Meanwhile, more and more guests were arriving. 200 people in fancy suits and dresses crowded the roadside, clutching gift boxes and looking at their phone screens in confusion. Some were recording the scene on video. Madison, turning away from the whole absurd commotion, stood aside in her luxurious dress and cried quietly. Jacob stood next to her for a minute, scrolled through something on his phone, then, without a word, got into his car and drove away, without saying goodbye to his bride. My phone vibrated intensely. The screen lit up with the names of my mother, my father. Angry messages poured in. I ignored them all and ordered another cup of coffee. Eventually, the police restored order, asking everyone to disperse. The guests, the caterers, and the florists drove away. Madison, still in her dress, got into the car with her mother, and they left. The film crew, without interrupting their work for a minute, continued their professional tasks as if nothing had happened. I finished my coffee, paid the bill, and taking a detour, left the restaurant. I spent the rest of the day at a friend's apartment with my phone turned off. When I finally turned it on in the evening, a barrage of 47 missed calls and over 60 messages hit me. Most were from my mother. At first, her texts were blazing with rage. "How could you do this to your own sister? You ruined everything. This is unforgivable." Then the tone shifted to manipulative. "We spent tens of thousands of dollars on this wedding. You must reimburse us immediately." I typed a single response. "I won't give you a single cent. You planned a wedding in my house without asking my permission. That's on your conscience." And after that, I blocked her number. Locked. 2 weeks passed. I consciously avoided social media, burying myself in work, trying to convince myself that life was gradually returning to its normal, calm track. Then a call came from an unknown number. My father's voice sounded tired and subdued. "Olivia, your mother is sick. She has breast cancer. She starts treatment next week. She didn't want to worry anyone, but she can't hide it anymore." He added that she had already posted about it on Facebook and people were helping with medical expenses. After hanging up, I logged into a long, unvisited social network. My mother had published a lengthy, emotional post about her diagnosis, attaching a link to a GoFundMe page. In one day, she had managed to raise $12,000. However, scrolling through her photos from the last few months, from Madison's dress fitting, from a charity lunch, from a garden party, from an event at the country club, I saw a completely healthy, energetic, radiant woman, not at all like someone desperately fighting a serious illness. She was lying. I felt it in my bones and was determined to prove it. I created a separate folder on my laptop and began meticulously collecting evidence. Every photo, every post, every public event she had attended during the time when, according to her, she should have already been battling the cancer she had kept silent about until a convenient moment. A week later, Madison called me. Her voice was hollow and devoid of inflection. "Jacob is gone," she said. "His phone is disconnected. The apartment is empty. He just vanished." A nagging feeling that something was wrong made me spend the next few hours on social media. Jacob's Facebook page was private, but his profile picture had changed. I clicked on the name he was tagged with. Amanda Wu, a successful entrepreneur, an amazingly beautiful and confident woman. Her profile was public, and the last post, dated 3 days ago, showed a photo of her slender hand with a luxurious diamond ring. The caption read, "He finally asked. Can't wait to marry my best friend." Jacob Miller was tagged in the photo. I took screenshots and sent them to Madison. She called back an hour later. "I was the backup option," she said quietly, without emotion. "He was with her the whole time we were engaged." "I'm sorry, Madison, do you want to come over?" "Actually, I found something you need to see. Can I come over right now?" She showed up at my place half an hour later, clutching a worn leather diary. "I found this in some boxes in the attic at Mom and Dad's," she said, handing it to me. "It's Mom's diary. You need to read it." I opened the yellowed pages and immersed myself in reading. The entries spanned many years. One, particularly vivid, read, "Madison is so easy to control. She is perfect material for manipulation. She will take care of me when I get old. The other one, Olivia, is too smart and independent. I need to break her. Make her feel guilty about everything. Make her manageable." I kept reading, and my hands began to tremble. On the next page was a confession. I convinced Olivia to turn down the graduate school scholarship. If she had left, she would have become too independent. Better to keep her close and under control. And that was just the beginning. Page after page revealed her monstrous plans for both of us. How she deliberately sabotaged my marriage to Brian to make me feel like a failure, and how she pushed Madison towards Jacob solely because of his family's money and connections. After reading the diary, my world turned upside down, and I desperately needed to talk to someone who understood the depth of this downfall, with someone who, like me, had been a target for my mother's refined manipulations. Gathering my courage, I dialed Brian's number, my ex-husband. "Brian, I know this will sound strange, but I need to tell you something." My voice trembled. "I found my mother's diary. She wrote about how she deliberately sabotaged our marriage." There was a long, heavy pause on the other end of the line. "Can I come over?" I finally exhaled. He showed up at my doorstep an hour later, holding a cardboard box, worn at the corners. "I've kept this for 2 years," he said quietly, placing the box on the kitchen table. "Didn't know what to do with it." Inside was a stack of letters, dozens of envelopes addressed to Brian, all from my mother. I took the first sheet and started reading, and with every word it felt like an icy wave was washing over me. "Brian, I'm worried about Olivia's mental health. Lately, she's been acting strangely. I think she needs professional help, but she refuses to listen to me. As her husband, you need to take control of the situation." Another letter. "Olivia has always had problems with impulse control and emotional regulation. I'm afraid she isn't capable of being a good wife. You deserve better." "She sent these letters while we were married." Brian's voice was even, but there was a deep-seated pain in his eyes. "At least twice a month for the last year. She also called me constantly. Told me you were planning to leave me, that you were saying terrible things about me, that I was probably cheating on you." I remembered those arguments, those baseless accusations, the poisonous distrust that poisoned our relationship until it crumbled to dust. "She told me you were cheating on me," I whispered quietly. "She said things like, 'Brian isn't right for you and he's a bad person.' She made me paranoid." We sat in oppressive silence, both digesting the monstrous truth that lay between us like a heavy burden. "What are you going to do?" Brian finally asked. "Madison and I are going to confront her, tomorrow, at my parents'. Do you want to come?" The next day, Madison and I drove to our parents' house. Brian followed us in his car. My mother opened the door, and a mask of genuine surprise froze on her face. "Olivia, Madison, I wasn't expecting both of you. We need to talk," my firm voice sounded. "All of us, right now." We entered the living room. My father was sitting on the sofa with a newspaper in his hands. He looked up at us, puzzled. "What's going on?" Madison and I sat down on the opposite sofa. Brian remained standing by the door, a silent witness. "Mom, we know about the fake cancer," I stated. Her face instantly turned white. "I don't know what you're talking about." "You're not sick. You've been at parties and events all month. I have photos. You committed fraud with that GoFundMe campaign. Olivia, you're talking nonsense. She tried to parry, but her voice trembled. We also found your diary, Madison added coldly. We know what you've been doing to both of us for years. I took out my phone and handed it to my father, showing him a photo of a page from the diary. She wrote about manipulating Madison to marry Jacob for his money and connections. She wrote about making me turn down the graduate school scholarship to keep me dependent on her. My father took the phone, and his fingers trembled noticeably as they slid across the screen. And here's proof of how she destroyed my marriage. I gestured towards Brian. He has letters she sent him, trying to convince him I was mentally unstable. My mother slowly rose from her chair, and a storm of fear and denial swirled in her eyes. This is all a monstrous misunderstanding. You're taking things out of context. You don't understand the true state of affairs. She tried to counter, but her voice, usually so confident and authoritative, now sounded cracked and unconvincing. Close the GoFundMe, Madison demanded, and her quiet but firm tone held not a trace of her former uncertainty. Return all the donations and get therapy. We insist you see a specialist for narcissistic personality disorder. I, supporting my sister, added, and if you refuse, we will sue you for fraud and file a report for years of psychological abuse and manipulation. She looked at my father, seeking at least a drop of support in his eyes, but he was looking at her with such detached astonishment, as if he were seeing a complete stranger, whose essence turned out to be the complete opposite of the image he had cherished in his heart for years. And then she burst into tears, and this time her tears were not theatrical and performative, but genuine, coming from the very depths of a tormented soul where a belated realization had suddenly broken through. I didn't realize it was that bad. I didn't understand what I was doing, she sobbed. But Madison and I stood unyielding. That's not enough, I said coldly. Close the fundraiser today. Post a public admission. Return the money, get therapy. Those are your only options. She complied that same day. Her lengthy, humiliating admission appeared on Facebook for all to see, and all $12,000 were returned to the donors. Her friends, her club partners, everyone before whom she had so carefully built her impeccable facade, saw the naked truth. Over the next week, her social circle, so cherished by her, crumbled to dust. Phone calls stopped, event invitations dried up, and her reputation, built on the sand of lies, collapsed with a deafening roar. A month later, my parents sold their spacious house and moved to a modest apartment in another city, trying to start life with a clean slate. Though, could that really fix what had been broken over so many years? I changed my phone number, permanently blocking both of them on all social media, severing those poisonous threads that had bound me to the past for so long. I maintained contact with Madison. She began the difficult journey of therapy to heal from what she herself called the golden child syndrome, and we started meeting for lunch every 2 weeks, building new, fragile but genuine relationships, brick by brick, free from our mother's pernicious influence. Both Brian and I started spending more time together. At first, it was just friendly meetings, attempts to catch up on lost years, but gradually, slowly and carefully, something more began to grow between us, a tender and tremulous hope. Our marriage didn't fall apart because of us, he said one evening, looking at the sunset over the ocean. It collapsed because someone else was actively and purposefully working to destroy it. He fell silent, then asked quietly, "Do you think we have a chance to try again?" He looked at me for a long time, and in his eyes I read the same pain, the same hope, and the same forgiveness. "Yes," I exhaled. "I think we could." He came back, and 3 months later, we remarried at the City Hall, in a quiet, almost intimate ceremony where Madison was the only witness. No pomp, no crowds of guests, no forced drama, only our hard-won truth. 6 months after our reunion, I found out I was pregnant. We sat in the doctor's office holding our breath, looking at the ultrasound screen where a new life was pulsating and moving. Our child. "Will you tell your parents?" Brian asked carefully later as we were driving home. I I thought about it, about my mother's manipulations, about the yellowed diary pages, about everything she had done, and the chasm she had dug between us. No, I answered quietly but decisively. I'm not sure they could build a healthy, genuine relationship with our child without trying to control everything. I won't risk his happiness and peace of mind. Brian nodded silently, his hand covering mine. I understand. We drove back to our beach house, that very refuge that had once saved me and given me the strength to fight, and now it was destined to become the cradle for our new family. A real family, built on a foundation of honesty, trust, and mutual respect, not on the shifting sands of manipulation and lies. My mother had tried to control every aspect of my life, but in the end she failed. I was free. Madison found freedom, and our child, I knew, would grow up free, unburdened by that weight of manipulation and guilt that had poisoned our own childhood for so long.